right. Hello. Welcome, everyone. So nice to meet all of you. My name is John Paul Lashan. I'm the founder and CEO of Verso Ministries. We are based in South Bend, Indiana. We are so glad to welcome everybody into our Catholic Travel Showcase webinar. We're excited to share about who we are, what we do, and invite you to join us on pilgrimage. I'm joined by my colleague, Joan Watson.
Hi, everyone.
Yeah, great. And we're just going to spend some time here learning about pilgrimage, what we do at Verso, and inviting you to join us on hopefully on a future pilgrimage. So, for those that are joining, you're welcome to put your name, your location that you're calling in from in the chat. We'll have a couple more times with some questions to participate as we go on this webinar. But yeah, any questions or comments at all, please feel free to put them in the chat. So, but as we start all things here at Verso, we're going to start with prayer. This is our climbing higher prayer. So our patron is Blessed Pier Giorgio Frassati. We are very excited because he's being canonized this August, and that's what we're here to talk about. So you'll notice here we asked for his intercession in our prayer. This is a prayer that we wrote together as a staff a couple of years ago, and it's just a beautiful way that we like to start all of our pilgrimages, and so I invite you into that as well. So let us begin in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Lord, as we embark upon this pilgrimage together, guide my steps. While I cannot anticipate every twist and turn ahead, I trust that you will lead me and strengthen me, inviting me to discover beauty in ways I cannot imagine. Give me the eyes to see your presence, the ears to hear your voice, and an open heart, ready to learn from each person, place, and story that I encounter. Help me to look beyond myself and discover the world as you see it. Draw me closer to those around me. Encourage me to slow down, to let go of needless worry. Let my mind wander and my heart wonder at the unexpected, often ordinary ways you find me. With this next step, no matter how small, meek, and humble, I show you my desire and my commitment, despite my imperfections, to answer your call to come follow me, to thirst after truth, justice, and love, and ultimately to always find my path back to you, my eternal home. Through the intercession of Blessed Pier Giorgio Frassati, give me the strength, courage, and trust to discover everything you have in store for me in this life and the next. Amen. In the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Thanks, John Paul. So, as John Paul mentioned, we have a lot going on today. This hopefully will be interactive and fun. We have some polls and some questions. So people are putting in the chat where they're from. Please continue to do that. We love to see really people from all over the country joining us, from California to Virginia. So we have the two coasts and everybody in between. So it's going to be interactive. You're going to learn a lot, hopefully, about some of our destinations. There will be a time for question and answer afterwards. And there's a special gift at the end. So we do want you to stay till the end to get that special gift. So this is the first poll. Why are you here? And so we have a poll you can put in the chat. You can fill out the poll. Maybe you're just here because you want to know more about the Jubilee. Maybe you want to go to Pier Giorgio's canonization. Maybe you just want to travel somewhere, or maybe you're just bored and you want to see pretty pictures. And we're hoping there are lots of pretty pictures to entertain you. So here's the poll. Feel free to answer. Why did you come to this webinar? We'll give some time for people.
I did launch the poll, Joni, so.
Oh, thank you very much.
You're welcome. The answers are coming in. We'll give you another 10 seconds or so to answer the poll. All right, 3 more seconds. We got most people answered. So, all right, as we end the poll here, looks like 68% of you said that number 1, I wanted to know more about the Jubilee. And then the second choice was 37% said I just want to travel somewhere. And 25% said I want to go to Pier Giorgio's canonization. And the last 10% said they just wanted to see some pretty pictures.
I love that.
So there you go.
Happy with it. Well, great. Well, hopefully we can solve all those. We could give you a little bit, no matter why you came, we can give you a little taste of everything. So we'll do some introductions. We're actually going to tell you a little bit about Verso Ministries, go over some myths about pilgrimage. What is a pilgrimage? We'll talk about your pilgrimage if you were to travel with Verso. And then we'll get into some details about both the Jubilee and then Pier Giorgio's canonization in particular. We'll talk about some of our other upcoming trips, and then we'll go to next step. So, John Paul,
Great.
do you want to tell us a little bit about Verso?
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you, Joni. I just wanted to welcome, there are some of our past travelers in the webinar, so thank you for joining us. We're so happy to have you, invite you back to another pilgrimage with us. So, as I mentioned at the beginning of this webinar, my name is John Paul LaShawn. I'm the founder and CEO. Prior to Verso, I was in ministry. So I worked a long time in college campus ministry as well as parish ministry. And I just want to share that the founding of Verso, it's called Verso Ministries for a reason, because we do want to minister with you, basically. We want to join with you on these pilgrimages, be your accompanying guide as we go on these sacred journeys together. And so that's why Versa was founded. It was to facilitate encounters with Jesus through travel. So we do ministry. We're experts in travel, but we're also experts in ministry. And we hope you experience that at every point that you work with us here at Verso.
And John Paul mentioned I'm Joan Watson, and I'm the Pilgrim Formation Manager. And so I help you prepare for your pilgrimage and then process your pilgrimage and then give you some resources while you're on your pilgrimage to really experience spiritually that encounter with Jesus Christ.
Yeah, so some fun facts. I mentioned earlier that our patron is Blessed Pier Giorgio. He had a line called Verso l'Alto, and that's translated from Italian to mean to the heights. And that really typifies his kind of encapsulates his life's motto, if you will, with it being basically that idea of if you climb a mountain to the heights, the higher you go, the closer you can hear the voice of Christ. So that was one of his famous sayings, both Verso Alto, as well as this idea that the higher you go, the closer you can hear the voice of Christ. And that image is really what we are going for here at Verso, that on a pilgrimage, you're kind of climbing that mountain as you journey along. And we hope that through the experience of a pilgrimage, you can hear closer the voice of Christ in your own life. So we are over 8.5 years old. I like to say that we've survived both the pandemic and now also we're in Israel. So we are a steadfast company that's here to stay, and we're excited to travel with you here now. And our staff, as I mentioned before, has experience in both travel and ministry. I think that's really our biggest difference maker. As Joni mentioned, her title is Pilgrim Formation Manager. I can tell you for sure, any other travel company that you work with does not have a formation person on staff that her whole role is to help prepare you for your pilgrimage and process it when you come home. As I mentioned, our core focus is facilitating encounters with Jesus, and that's really what a pilgrimage is, right? It's a sacred journey. It's a chance to encounter God in the places that God has revealed himself to us. So we know that our God is an incarnational God, right? That God is revealed to us through the world, through the places that we visit, the things that we touch, the people we speak with. We can hear the voice of God through all of those tangible things in the world. And that's really the whole point of a pilgrimage, is you travel to these sacred places to learn more about who God is, who you are, who your neighbor is, and ultimately, again, that hearing the voice of Jesus more clearly in your life. That's the whole goal of any pilgrimage. So, as if you travel with us here at Verso, and hopefully those that have traveled with us before would agree with these three uniques, but we have an intentional and thorough pilgrimage process. So this is not just like, oh, hey, let's just think about what are some fun places to go in Italy. No, we've really thought through the pilgrimage schedule, right? You know, even things like, hey, do we have time to go to the restroom? Are we building enough time to visit and to pray at the sites that we go to? Of course, you'll have a knowledgeable guide with you, and you'll have kind of a schedule for the day. But have we paced it right? Right? And are we going to a restaurant not only that's convenient, but it's also good to eat eat at, right? So we very intentionally think about all the different things that go into a pilgrimage. The second is personalized service and care. So when you work with Verso, you're not just a number to us. You are part of the Verso family when you travel with us. So we're a small outfit. We're a team of about 7 people, and when you call us, we'll answer the phone. Right? You're going to talk to somebody. You're not just going to get an automated response and never hear from us. Okay. And again, the biggest difference maker here at Verso, I think, is that we are all centered on Jesus. This is a ministry. The whole goal of Verso is to bring people closer to the Lord, and we do that. We just happen to do that through the experience of travel. This is just a list of some of our of our trusted clients. So if you've never heard of Verso before, just know that we've worked with many great institutions, from some of the biggest archdioceses in the country to some of the smallest parishes and Catholic high schools, organizations, you name it. We've probably worked with that type of group. So today, I assume most of you are probably individual travelers who are discerning coming with us, which is great. We'd love to have you. If you happen to be part of a small group, or you want to bring your family, or you want to even go bigger, you want to bring your parish, you want to bring your school, your diocese, we can work with any size group. If you want to do a group with us, it's usually 20 people or more. And then if you're a smaller group, either just yourself or a small handful, your family, friends of 5 to 10, whatever it might be, we have plenty of open pilgrimages that you can join. So these are just some of our testimonials from some of our happy travelers before. Okay, so what is a pilgrimage? So this is a great question, because I think there's so many different misconceptions of what a pilgrimage is and can be. But our first question is another poll. Have you ever been on a pilgrimage before? And that kind of, as I mentioned just now, it might be confused. What is a pilgrimage? And maybe you don't know. Maybe you don't know if you've been on a pilgrimage before. But let's do the poll. Let's see. Have you been on a Catholic pilgrimage before? Yes or no, and if you're not sure, that's totally fine. So the way I typically answer this question, because a lot of people ask me, like, what's the first pilgrimage you ever did? And I had the pleasure growing up of doing a lot of travel with my parents. And the funny part is I feel like I've been to pilgrimage sites before, especially when I was a child, but I don't know if I knew I was on pilgrimage, if that makes sense. So I would say my first official pilgrimage that I intentionally went into it as a pilgrimage was probably not until I was maybe like, goodness, mid 20s or so, something like that. But I had been to places like the Vatican before, but I never quite knew it was a pilgrimage. So I don't know. I don't know if you would consider that a pilgrimage or not, if you weren't quite sure. They certainly impacted me, those visits prior to that. But anyways, okay, everybody's answered here. So it looks like 62% have been on a pilgrimage before, and 38% have not. So great. Well, whether this is your first time on a pilgrimage or your 10th time or more, we would love to have you, join us on a future pilgrimage. So great. So some of the pilgrimage myths that I wanted to speak on. The example I always give was when I first started Verso, I invited my dad actually to join us on a pilgrimage to Italy. And I remember it clear as day because my father, who is a wonderful man, he's kind of the classic Catholic, um, uh, a pretty typical Catholic person, I would say, right? So he goes to Mass every Sunday. He helps with Eucharistic ministry, right, at Masses. But beyond that, he's not super involved. He helps out here and there with when they need things. He certainly tithes and stuff. So a pretty, I think, good, solid Catholic. And I invited my dad. This is kind of the typical person you'd want to come on a pilgrimage, right? And my dad goes, I don't know if I want to do that. Like, why would I go on a pilgrimage? And the reason he said no is because he had a misconception of what a pilgrimage is. So he thought it was this super serious, okay, we're going to pray, 24/7, and we're going to do, super penitential, pray the rosary on our knees every day for 30 minutes or so. I don't know. It was just a very dramatic sense of what a pilgrimage might look like. And so once I explained to him, it's like, hey, Dad, no, like a pilgrimage is essentially it's a sacred journey, right? It's certainly prayerful, right? It is contemplative, but it's also important to visit the highlights of the place you're going. So when we go to Paris, yeah, we're going to have some free time so you can go to the Eiffel Tower if you want to. We're going to have good meals, good wine, because again, that all that stuff is part of the pilgrimage experience because we believe that God is in all things. You can experience God in all of those things. And so why not enjoy them, right? So sometimes there's some myths about what a pilgrimage is and should look like. And we think pilgrimage is a pretty open-ended concept. I think the important things there are that it's intentional, that it's prayerful, that has good community, people who want to travel with each other and who are open and they want to have good, honest conversations. But by no means is it made for one type of person, right? A pilgrimage is open to anybody, whether you have never been to church before or you go every day to daily mass. A pilgrimage can speak to you. So it's really a very welcoming environment. And I've mentioned this idea of a spiritual journey. I think that's what is at the heart of it. The whole goal of a pilgrimage is to take the spiritual journey that may be in your heart and kind of manifest it into the physical, right? Because the physical sometimes can show you what's happening internally in your own life, right? So sometimes those things are in many ways disconnected in our day-to-day life. But in pilgrimage, you can put those two things together where this physical journey is helping you understand what your spiritual journey to God looks like and where God is leading you, right? So again, that whole idea of how is God speaking to you in your life and how can you listen more clearly? The whole goal of a pilgrimage is to hear God's voice more clearly so you can can live more fully who God is calling you to be, right? Perfect. So, pilgrimage has been around for literally centuries. I mean, there's so many stories of travel and journey in the Bible. We see it all over the place, from the flood with Noah to Moses to Jesus himself went on pilgrimage. It's a very central concept in the Jewish faith to do pilgrimage, and we've kept that alive. In its more Christian form, it started really in the Middle Ages as a penitential rite that people would leave their doorstep if they had some sort of sin that they wanted um, to do penance for. They would leave their doorstep and travel to Rome on a very penitential pilgrimage. So those aspects of penance are still part of the modern version of pilgrimage. I think the modern version probably a little more comfortable, a little more fun, so to speak. You don't just have to leave your front door with nothing with you, which is many of the pilgrims of the Middle Ages did. Um, but our view of a pilgrimage is very holistic. Okay. It is visiting the prayerful sites, of course, but it's also visiting the historical sites. It's learning about the culture, meeting the people along the way, enjoying the food, hearing the music. All of those things can help us understand who God is and who God is calling us to be. So that's our vision of pilgrimage, and we hope you share in that because that's what you're going to get when you travel with Verso. What will your pilgrimage look like? And we'll get into some of the details as we talk about different options here. But really, you can count on a pretty comprehensive package when you travel with Verso. So when you travel with Verso, obviously you have a local tour guide who's with you basically 24/7, right? So the moment that you arrive in the country you're visiting, you'll have somebody to help guide you, navigate, help you understand what's important to see, where to go for dinner, like all the things from A to Z. They're there to help you navigate that journey. I failed to mention, I kind of jumped again. I'm already talking about the pilgrimage experience itself, but also know our team is there to help you. The moment you register, we're going to be in touch with you. We're going to call you. We're going to talk with you to say, hey, welcome to your pilgrimage. Do you have any questions? You have constant access to our team to understand, okay, what to expect and how to prepare both logistically but also spiritually for my pilgrimage. All of those things are included. So on the pilgrimage itself, of course, things like meals, accommodations, having a chaplain that's along with you, a tour guide, all of those things are part of the pilgrimage. So really the goal here is that you don't have to worry about anything. You can just worry about fully experiences the places that you visit. So flights are on here. I will say some of our groups do include group flights, some of them do not. So you'll just have to want to make sure you check the website carefully to know, is there a group flight included with this pilgrimage or not? And if you need any help with flights, you can always reach out to our team.
Okay, I'm going to give John Paul a break from talking about pilgrimage, and we're going to look at some of our upcoming departures. But we have one more poll for you, and this is open-ended, and it's where do you want to go? So we had in the chat people talking about how they might be interested in the Jubilee, they might be interested in specifically going to Pier Giorgio, his canonization. So we have one more poll, and that is where do you want to go? Let me pull that up. So where are we going to go next? We have a lot of great destinations that Verso is headed to. And I am going to start by talking about the Jubilee because so many of you said they want to find out more about the Jubilee. So this year, 2025, is a Jubilee year. And those only happen every 25 years, give or take. Ordinary Jubilees happen every 25 years. And they're just special years called by the Holy Father to be great times of grace. And there's different hallmarks to a Jubilee, including the chance to go on pilgrimage to the four major basilicas in Rome and to walk through special holy doors that are only open during the Jubilee year. So we have a lot of trips going to Rome for the Jubilee. John Paul and I have both been there already. They say about 1 million pilgrims, maybe close to 1.5 million pilgrims, have already been through the Holy Door at St. Peter's since Pope Francis opened that door on Christmas Eve. So that's a lot of pilgrims. One of our colleagues, Jenna, has actually been to Italy twice already, leading a group. So we have a lot of great dates that are open to anybody interested in going. Maybe you thought, wow, I have a devotion to Blessed Carlo Acutis. Come with us. It's not too late. Come with us to Carlo's canonization. So we just have a lot of great dates going, but I want to really focus on the canonization of Pier Giorgio Frassati. But these are all dates, so you can find them on our website. At the end, we'll have a link to the place where you can sign up. Some of the trips are a little different. Some of them go to Milan, some of them go to Assisi. So we have a little bit for everybody. But so many people have asked me, what is different about Rome in 2025? What's different about Rome during this Jubilee year? And one thing I can tell you after being there last month, Rome is beautifully clean, which if you've ever been to Rome, that's not what you how you usually describe Rome. There's plenty of graffiti still everywhere, but they've cleaned up so many of the monuments and so many of the fountains. They've actually installed several pedestrian only areas that, there's whole streets the street leading up to St. Peter's, for example, Via Conciliazione is now pedestrian only. They've constructed a brand new piazza at the end of that street. So it used to be when you walked from Castel San Angelo up Via Conciliazione to St. Peter's, you had to cross a really busy street and you kind of took your life in your hands crossing the street and it got backed up with pedestrians. Now that's all pedestrian only and it's just beautiful. So it's a beautiful time to be in Rome. Is it crowded? Yes. Not so much right now. It's a little off season. The summer will be crowded, but there's something really beautiful about that. I've been telling people it's kind of like midnight mass on Christmas or maybe Easter vigil. When you get to mass and you're like, oh man, someone's sitting in my pew. And there's that temptation to be upset that somebody's sitting in your pew because you've never seen them before. And then you realize, no, praise God that they're here. Praise God that this church is full rather than being upset that someone took your parking space. And so that's how I feel about Rome during the Jubilee. Is it crowded? Yes, but there's this thrill in the air that we're participating in something very historic. Jubilee started in 1300 with Pope Boniface VIII declaring the special year in 1300. One of the first pilgrims of the first Jubilee was Dante himself as he was writing his Divine Comedy. And so you're participating in this incredibly historic occasion that pilgrims have participated in the last 725 years. So you're praying at the tombs of the apostles, you're receiving the sacraments, and you're receiving these special graces of the Jubilee year. As I mentioned, you walk through the holy doors at the four major basilicas, and there are also special events throughout the year, Jubilee days. We're taking a group to the Jubilee of people with disabilities. We're so excited about that. And so we took a group to the special Jubilee for armed forces, the military and the police. And so there's the Jubilee of catechists. There's the Jubilee of young people. And so just really a beautiful time to be in Rome to experience the graces of these Jubilee years. Now, Pier Giorgio Frassati is being canonized in the midst of this Jubilee year. And so who was Pier Giorgio Frassati? He was a young Italian man who's came from a relatively upper middle class family, pretty wealthy. And he dedicated his life to both serving the poor, but also evangelizing in a really beautiful, normal way. So he evangelized his family and his friends just by living the gospel. John Paul II called him a man of the Beatitudes. And he's such a witness for us of what it means just to live an authentically beautiful Catholic life. He was active in politics in a time when Catholics weren't particularly active in politics. He worked very hard for peace during the First World War. He was growing up at a very difficult time in the church and in Europe between World War I and World War II. And so he just is such a beautiful witness to us. We actually have a podcast with Verso called In Via, and in the next month we'll have a special episode on Pier Giorgio Frassati with the founder of Frassati USA. But what's unique about Pier Giorgio's canonization, we're obviously very excited because he is our patron at Verso. But what's unique about his canonization is that it's going to take place in the middle of the Jubilee of young people, which is similar to World Youth Day. It has kind of that World Youth Day vibe. One of the very first World Youth Days took place during the Jubilee year of 2000. And so a lot of what we're going to see this summer with the Jubilee of Young People is very similar to what happened during that Jubilee 2000 World Youth Day. But this Jubilee of Young People is going to have this beautiful vigil where we will walk out to a vigil site, we'll camp, we'll pray with the Holy Father, God willing, with the Blessed Sacrament, have Eucharistic adoration, and then the next morning will be Pier Giorgio's canonization Mass. So I love the fact that Pier Giorgio will be canonized amidst an adventure and amidst Eucharistic adoration and then the Mass, because that really summarizes the witness of Pier Giorgio Frassati. He was a man of adventure, but he's also really a saint dedicated to the Eucharist. And so the Jubilee of Young People takes place at the end of July, beginning of August. We're taking a lot of young people, and we would love to take you, your group, just to experience this beautiful time in the church. So there'll be different Jubilee events, there'll be catechesis throughout Rome. And then, of course, we'll culminate with that fantastic canonization Mass. When you go with Verso to special Jubilee events like the Jubilee of Young People, we will register you for that Jubilee. Now, the interesting thing about the Jubilee for young people is that they are encouraging you to register with a group. And so we would provide that. We would be able to register you for the events and get you access to things such as that special canonization Mass. This is the itinerary for that trip. Every trip we take to Rome looks a little different because of the group, because of the events. When there are Jubilee events going on, if you are part of that group and you want to go to the Jubilee events, we try to make that possible. If you don't, then you have free time, which is a great gift in Rome as well. And so when we look at that Jubilee for young people, this is kind of our basic itinerary that most of our groups are going to follow. If you aren't part of a group, we have a group. We call it open enrollment. We would welcome you to join us. So even if you think, well, I'm not part of a college, or I'm not part of a high school group, or I'm not part of a parish group, we would welcome you to come to the canonization of Pier Giorgio, and we have a group for you. It simply is open to all. And so arriving to Rome, participating in the Jubilee events throughout the city in those first days. When there aren't Jubilee events, you'll have free time. You'll be visiting those 4 major basilicas to go through the Holy Door and pray in those beautiful churches. Then there'll be that walking pilgrimage on August 2nd out to a place called Tor Vergata, which is the same place that the pilgrimage ended for the Jubilee 2000. We'll have that vigil prayer service out there, and then the canonization the next day. We thought it'd be fun to give you a little hint before we move out of Italy into some of our other destinations, a little taste of Italy. I love Italian food, and there's nothing like Italian food in Rome. And so in our emails to advertise for this, we kind of teased that we would touch on a little Italian food, because how can you talk about Italy without talking about food? One thing I just want to highlight is if you go to Rome, you want to try one of the 4 Roman pastas. It's neat because in Rome, all of Italy has certain pastas and certain pizzas and certain cuisine, but it varies drastically throughout the region. Northern Italian food looks very different than Sicilian food, and Roman food is unique. And so these 4 Roman pastas that you see on the slide here, my favorite is amatriciana, which is a tomato sauce with some pig cheek. We would call it bacon, but guanciale is much better than bacon. That pizza you see, Rome is known for kind of flat pizza, and you can actually buy it by the slice. And so that's a great lunch option. So we love to help you find kind of the jewels of Roman cuisine and the best places to eat in Rome. So we just wanted to get your mouth watering. So again, these are our Italian destinations, our Italian dates. And all of the dates that you see are open to all. And so we'd be happy to help you sign up for one of these trips to experience this great beauty of the Jubilee.
if you don't mind, Joni, if you could just linger on those, because we had a couple questions in the chat.
Oh,
Because
sure.
obviously the Jubilee of Young People is primarily geared towards young people. The average age is between 18 to 39. That's more typical. Now, people are excited about the canonization of Blessed Pier Giorgio. That's part of the reason we want to highlight it. And we broke down the itinerary there because it is so different from the other trips that we're doing. But I will mention all of the rest on our calendar here for Italy are geared towards people of all ages, and they're all open to people joining them. So the ones coming up here in April, May, those are again open to anybody. They're geared for all ages. So we have things like a bus. Now you're in Rome, so just be prepared to walk a lot because Rome is a walking city. But on most days when we need a bus, we'll have one, right? But in certain days, you might be staying, just a 15-minute walk from the Vatican, so you walk over there. So I just wanted to highlight that because there was a couple questions there, and pilgrimages are start in Rome. Okay, they all have Rome is really the highlight, and there's a couple more, as Joni mentioned earlier, that head on to other places. So especially later in the year. So in October we have one starts in Rome at the beginning, but then heads on to Siena and Assisi. Another one in October goes to Rome, but then ends in Milan and Turin. And then November again another one Rome, and then also includes Assisi. So when you go to our website, you can find all of these dates there, the exact itineraries listed. And if you have questions, if you're like, hey, there's too many options, you can always call us, say, hey, here's when I want to travel, here's what I want to do, and our team can help you discern, okay, this is the right pilgrimage for you.
I also want to say that the Jubilee of Catechists is at the end of September. And you might be like, what is a catechist? A catechist is someone who teaches the faith, who passes on the faith. So you might think of a high school religion teacher, you might think of a Bible study leader, but all of us really are, first of all, are catechists. We're all called to teach the faith. But if you love that date and you're like, yeah, I probably won't belong because I'm not a catechist, I've never even heard that word, I would encourage you, if those dates work for you, still come along. Because during those special gatherings of catechists, you can either participate or you could have free time through Rome. So don't feel like, oh, well, that's a special jubilee and I'll stick out, I won't belong. You definitely will belong. Come on, and if there's a jubilee event that you feel like, oh, I could sit out of this, then there's a million things you can do in Rome and during that free time. So don't let that stop you.
Yeah, and I was just at the Jubilee of Deacons. I'm not a deacon by any means. We had 6 deacons with us on that pilgrimage. And honestly, my favorite event of the whole thing
Mm.
is I went to one of the deacon events and it was hosted by the Vatican. It was in the Pope Paul VI hall, so it was kind of in the back courtyard of the event hall within the Vatican city limits. And it was so special to watch the 6 deacons there renewed their vows to the diaconate at the Vatican on that day. I mean, just to be just such a privilege for me to be there witnessing other people because it was just so many. It was like going to somebody's wedding, right? A renewal of wedding vows because that was their moment to renew their vows to the diaconate. It was just so special. So, yeah, just another vote for if you head to the Jubilee, don't feel not welcome. You're welcome to any of these events, and all of these dates could be a great option for you. So, with that, let's change gear a little bit towards some of the other countries that we visit. So, one of the other big highlights is France, right? So, some major pilgrimage sites in France. Of course, you have Lourdes, you have places like Mont Saint Michel. You have all the pilgrimage sites in Paris to visit. The Sioux is a highlight is a big highlight for most people with Saint Therese of Lisieux. So we do have 2 trips heading to France this year. The first in June is more focused on the northern spots. Okay, and so you start in Paris. You visit things like the Notre Dame Cathedral, which is now reopened to visitors. So pilgrims can again head to the Notre Dame Cathedral. You've probably seen some of the news stories coming out in December because that's when it officially reopened to the public. So what a beautiful historic chance to visit that cathedral. Lisieux is a big highlight. Again, Saint Therese of Lisieux, her parents also there. This pilgrimage also is going to Normandy Beach. So if you are any of our history buffs here, it's also very moving, right? We all know the stories of World War II and what happened on that day in the course of the battle, and to be able to go there to pray at the American cemetery there, very, very moving. And Mont Saint Michel, also just a stunning place to visit. So famous for being on an island, and the tide goes in and out. So um, you can either cross by foot across when the tide is out, but when the tide comes back in, there's water between you and the island there. So just some beautiful, beautiful places to visit in northern France. So that's coming up here in June. Later in the fall, we have in October 1st through 10th pilgrimage to France. And this is a very special, kind of unique pilgrimage. Um, one of our chaplains from Indianapolis, Father Eric Augustine, put this together, and it's very much based in the history of their diocese and kind of the founding. Many of the earliest missionaries came from France to serve in the archdiocese of what is now the Archdiocese of Indianapolis. So they're visiting places like Paris as well, but then they're heading to Chartres. They're heading to Le Mans, which is the birthplace of Blessed Basil Moreau, which is he was the founder of the Congregation of Holy Cross of which started the University of Notre Dame. If you can follow all of those connections, okay. And so again, some very unique French saints to visit there. Um, and then there actually is one more. Sorry, it was just released. There's another one in October that has another one, which Johnny, we can add to the list here in October as well. There is another one in October that I didn't make the slide deck. I do apologize about that. But there is one more in October that people would be welcome to join. All right.
So we are also going to Mexico. We kind of mentioned it at the beginning of the webinar. We have two trips, one coming up quite soon, but still, if you want to join, we can make it happen. And then another one in November that I'm actually leading. So if you want to come with me to see Our Lady Guadalupe. And so there's so much in Mexico, such a rich heritage. And again, like so many of our trips, John Paul mentioned Normandy in France, we pair not just the Catholic sites, but also the historical sites, that heritage, to really understand the culture. And so Mexico's the same. We'll visit a pyramid. My trip, we're even going to the floating gardens. Actually, I think both trips we're going to the floating gardens south of the city. And so there's some historical and cultural opportunities, and then also lots of time to pray at the shrine of Our Lady Guadalupe, to climb Tepeyac Hill, and to see the real tilma that Our Lady gave us through Juan Diego. So really exciting times in Mexico. We're also heading to Ireland in October. So again, such a cultural experience. And so we don't just go to the churches of Ireland, we also want to experience Irish culture, but we will be visiting the churches in Ireland, and we'll be visiting Knock, which is an international Eucharistic and Marian shrine where Our Lady appeared. It's one of the Marian apparitions. We love Marian apparitions at Verso, and we try to hit as many in the different continents as we can. So Ireland will be a great trip, just a really great combination of both our Catholic history and our Catholic heritage, and then also just these really beautiful Catholic sites.
And that pilgrimage is being led by a native Irish chaplain. So I think it'll be extra special to go on that Ireland pilgrimage.
Yeah. Then, John Paul, do you want to speak about the place that's near and dear to your heart that we hope to go back to?
Yes, yes, we are praying every day for peace in the Holy Land, as we always have, and I think unfortunately we'll always be praying for peace in the Holy Land. So, as you know, the Holy Land is going through a very difficult time right now. We certainly pray for all of our colleagues that work over there are currently not working, for better or worse, and certainly we're watching the situation every day. So we have tentatively put a November pilgrimage on the books. I think we're pretty confident that this will be able to happen. I think you see all the news stories, and obviously it depends on the day and the week as to are the news outlets positively reporting on the situation there, or something hanging in the balance, right? So it's a constant monitoring of the situation. But again, I think planning out this far in March, we're about 8 months away. We're pretty confident that we'll be able to run this pilgrimage. We have heard of groups actually that have been already back to the Holy Land. So I think it is a relatively safe time to go. Obviously, you need to be aware of the risk. You need to be aware of the situation there. So everybody makes their own decisions. We cannot promise that nothing will happen in any of our destinations. We can't promise that. But just know that we will never knowingly put you into harm's way. And so, yeah, the Holy Land is a beautiful place. I highly encourage you to consider going if you've never been. Everybody always asks me, what's your favorite place to go, a favorite place to do a pilgrimage? And I would easily put hands down on the Holy Land. So much so that I actually moved my family. Our family lived there in Jerusalem for about 4 months in 2022. And it's just, yeah, very near and dear to place. And where else can you go where you can literally walk in the footsteps of Jesus, right? So as far as that goes, that's tentatively on the books. We have a process in place to assess the safety moving forward. Obviously, that's a no risk deposit. If we decide to cancel for safety reasons, then we will give full refunds back to pilgrims who have signed up on that pilgrimage. Great. So where do we go from here? So if you have further questions, you can always schedule a one-on-one travel consultation with our team. There's a link right here in the slide deck, which we will. So you can schedule a one-on-one travel consultation that could be done via phone call, Zoom, whatever you prefer. And at the appointed time, one of our team members will have that consultation with you. Of course, you can always head to our website if you're ready to book a pilgrimage. You are more than welcome to book. Most of our pilgrimages, it's typically a $500 deposit. Occasionally, it's more than that. Obviously, if your trip is coming up sooner rather than later, and sometimes you do have to pay, in full right away just to guarantee your spot. But generally, it's a $500 deposit, and then the full balance is typically due 120 days prior to departure. So all of the trips that we mentioned today are open for registration. They all currently have availability. So again, feel free to schedule a call, or you can go ahead right away online and book your pilgrimage.
And when we send out the slides and the recording from the webinar, these will be hyperlinked. And so that's why it simply says here. You're probably wondering how to access that. That will be a hyperlink in the slides. And then we'll put that in the email as well, so that you can immediately click that in the email and go ahead and schedule that call if you want.
Perfect. And we had some more questions. We didn't get to all of them,
Yes.
So,
Yes.
right. Oh, one question, Joni. What somebody asked, Christina asked, when you speak about the Jubilee events, what are the nature of these events? Talks, prayer, music, other?
Yeah, so it kind of depends on the Jubilee. And, John Paul mentioned that the special mass. So there's generally a mass with the Holy Father or with one of his representatives. So he was supposed to meet with the Jubilee. Obviously, he was supposed to have mass for the Jubilee of Deacons, and he wasn't able to. Same with the Jubilee of Artists. There were a lot of specific events geared towards the artists, and they met and they talked amongst themselves. They had discussions, and so it kind of depends on the individual groups and who's going and what events. Those events all are on the Vatican website as well. And they're being planned every day. But it's a combo of kind of all the things you mentioned, Christy. So talks, prayer, music, and then usually a special audience, or then a special mass with the Holy Father or one of the cardinals he's delegated.
Yeah, I think in my experience, very special, right? Like as Joni mentioned, it's like, yeah, it can maybe be a little crowded, but it's also like once in a lifetime type experience. So I think I've only heard positive feedback from all the Jubilee events that people have gone to. Somebody asked, do your pilgrimages include daily masses?
Yes. Yes. We love, obviously, centering our trip on the sacraments and on the Eucharist. And so sometimes we actually participate in public masses there to experience the culture. It kind of depends on the trip. And then if there's a chaplain with the trip, so oftentimes the chaplain gets to experience celebrating mass in really incredible places. That's usually people's highlights, is just the places, depending on where we are, the places that you get to celebrate mass. Just really, really incredible and often very intimate daily masses.
Yeah, for instance, in Rome, I mean, obviously a highlight is to have mass inside of St. Peter's Basilica. So that is like a must include for all of our groups. And sadly, sometimes if you travel with other people, you don't have Mass in St. Peter's. It's just another tour stop along the way.
Mhm.
But for us, it's like, hey, this is the primary reason to go. We're going to have Mass, private Mass within St. Peter's Basilica. That is like, we are going to move mountains to do that. And if not anything else, right? That's a big, big highlight. So
Yeah.
another question, do you tailor pilgrimages?
That's a great question. And that's something we love to do. I'll let John Paul as say in sales talk a little bit more about it. But I, as pilgrim formation manager, I love it when we tailor pilgrimages because if there's a group that's big enough that allows us to kind of customize a trip, that means I get to learn so much about that place because I get to do my research and learn about the places so that I can form your pilgrims. But John Paul, could you talk a little bit more about like what that looks like to tailor pilgrimages for a group and all those
Yeah.
specifics?
Yeah, so typically our minimum group size is around 20. So 20 is the point at which the finances start to balance out the customization costs, right? So every group that we customize is obviously extra work because we're putting a lot of intentionality and thought and planning to tailor your specific pilgrimage. So we can work with that. We've worked as small as one person before. Okay, so if your budget allows, we can do something as small as a handful or just for a family. But more generally speaking, it's usually a group size of 20 or larger. If it's smaller than 20, just have a conversation with us. We can help you discern whether that's a good fit or whether you'd be a better fit in with one of our typical groups. With that being said, Joni, you did mention free time. I think that's another great kind of hybrid route because all of our pilgrimages, obviously, all of them have free time to a certain extent. So sometimes we have families that join us or couples or individuals who come. Actually, we had somebody that did this on the Jubilee of Deacons. She was really, really excited to see the Borghese Gallery while she was
Mm-hmm.
in Rome. And so for one of her days, she opted during her free time to head there. She, did it on her own. She booked the tickets on her own and made her way herself over there. So if there are specific things that you just want to do yourself while you're there, our team can also help navigate. Okay, when's a good time to do that? When's a good afternoon or a morning, whatever it might be, where you might be free, or sometimes people even skip something we have scheduled because they want to do something instead, which again is fine as long as you communicate with us what you're doing and we're not waiting around for you wondering where you are. You can always customize your own pilgrimage within what we're already doing.
I think another great option is to come early or to stay late. We have a lot of people who will participate in the pilgrimage, but maybe they want to see another Italian city. And so they'll come early, or maybe they'll stay later, or maybe they'll even go to another country afterwards. Like, well, I'm in Europe, let's do a week somewhere else. And so we can kind of help with pre stays and post stays, and we can help you kind of advise you on things like that. But that's a great option as well to participate in the pilgrimage, but maybe take advantage of that trip to Europe and see some other things afterwards.
All right. Any other questions here? I'm
I think
scrolling
that's
back to
it.
see any other questions. We had a question about group sizes, average size of our pilgrimages.
We love to keep pilgrimages small and as much as possible, but sometimes that's a bus of 40, sometimes that's a little smaller. But I think I saw in the chat, John Paul, you suggested like if that's really important to you and you want to make sure you're on a particularly small pilgrimage, you can always ask us like what the group is looking like because we can't guarantee that it'll be 30 or under, but I think we also recognize that there's a beauty in kind of those smaller groups.
Yeah. Other questions?
Okay. And you have our contact information. You'll get it on the slides. We'll send out the slides. Here's our contact information. If you think of a question later, think, oh, I wish I would have asked them this. I always say the worst question is the one that's not asked. And that's one reason when you go on pilgrimage with us, we have what we call a pack and prep meeting before we leave so that you can have a Zoom meeting. You can meet some people on your trip and ask those questions. The emails I send out in the weeks preceding the trip have like information about what power converters do I need? How do I change my money? What am I going to see? We understand that those practical things are really important. And the last thing we want you to do is go on pilgrimage with questions and then, show up in Rome with the wrong power converter or the wrong adapter, right? So we love to answer your questions. That's a reason that we have an entire staff member dedicated to supporting our pilgrims, the pilgrim support manager, Trisha. So feel free to reach out if you come, think of a question afterwards. Don't hesitate to reach out to us because we want to help you and we're here to help you. I think everybody's been waiting for this. So because you've watched this webinar all the way through, we want to thank you. We want to give you this gift of saving $200 on your next pilgrimage. If you book by the end of the month, we would love to see you on an upcoming trip. And you're just going to use this promo code in the booking when you book. Again, if you have any questions, you don't know if the promo code went through, please don't hesitate to reach out. We're here to help.
And that is per person. So per person, you get that off. So if it's you and a spouse or you and another family member, you put in that code, it will apply it to all people on your reservation.
Yeah. And again, if you have any trouble with that, do not hesitate to reach out. We're here. That's what I love about us, our small staff. And lots of people say that when they go on pilgrimage with Verso, they don't feel like a number. They really feel like they're part of a family. And that's a badge of honor. We love to accompany our pilgrims and really make it a time of accompaniment. So don't hesitate to reach out with questions. But thank you so much. I think we're wrapped up in the chat. I don't see any other questions, but thanks for joining us. Thanks, John Paul, for co-hosting.
You're welcome. Thanks, everyone. Hope to see you on one of our groups.
God bless.